Hey everybody, it's Gina here from Gina Makes It. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am giving you a step-by-step tutorial on how to create a journal cover and back cover like the one that I am currently working in, my March and April journal. So I already created one and I am going to be working on the second one. On the Graphic Fairies video that I had posted as well as on their website, I got a lot of questions about how I actually created this cover. It is an open spine journal, so the covers are sort of loose. They kind of hang there. So I just thought that I would give you a step-by-step on how to do it. I'm also going to be selling these two journals. So I just listed them in my Etsy store. So if you want to head to the end of this video, I'm going to do a flip through of the two journals, and it's also already listed in my Etsy store right now. So I start by cutting out some heavy cardstock. So this is just 8.5 by 11 that I cut down to 6 by 8, and I am going to start the cover by selecting some very old magazine paper. I'm trying to find something that I think is visually stimulating. So I pick out this image and I just kind of frame it and I glue it down. For all of the glue that I'm using here, I do use Fabri-Tac glue. I find that it is the best glue, but if you don't have any cardstock, you can use cardboard or maybe like an old box or something, just something that's a little bit on the heavier side. It doesn't matter if there's anything on it because you are going to be covering it up. So I'm folding over my edges just in case you can see them after I work on the inside. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do on the inside. Sometimes I do pieces on the inside, sometimes I cover the whole thing, but I just thought that that was a nice little image to have there, so I was just going to fold it over. And now I'm just going to trim off the excess off the top and off of the side. Next, I'm going to choose my next layer. So I look at this journal cover, this type of journal cover, as it's done in layers. And so my next layer, I want it to be a floral. And I chose this particular floral because it had some straight lines above and below the floral. And I feel like that really balances the image, and it also draws the eye to the floral. And I feel like it also gives it a little bit of boundary and stability around it. So I know that I want to slide it right underneath this little flap. But before I do that, I need to figure out what I'm going to do on the bottom. And I decide to add some more magazine. I love this border that is running at the bottom, and this is just the bottom half of that page that I ripped earlier. And so I just cut out a little piece, and I'm trying to figure out what part of it I want shown. And I decide that I want that corner, that right hand corner shown, but I don't want all that excess just kind of plain paper. I really want it to, that little corner, to run up to the corner of my journal. And so I'm being very fussy about where I'm putting it and how I'm gluing it down. And once I do that, you can see that I'm carefully putting it underneath that floral. I'm going to go around and trim all of my edges. Now that I have my 3 layers down, it's time to add some texture, and I do that through some vintage linens. Both of these journals are full of so many very old and beautiful vintage linens. I really felt that it was important for me to incorporate a lot into these journals because these are supposed to be soft, feminine journals, and I feel like the best way to achieve that is through the use of lots of laces and trims, very old, authentic laces and trims. So I wanted my lace here to be a little bit frayed because I'm looking for that element of texture, and so I'm just taking my scissors and I'm kind of ripping the lace up and I'm fraying the edges, and then I'm going to lay it right down on top of the floral image and that bottom half of that magazine image. And so I'm looking at this cover in thirds, and so this lace is covering the middle third and the bottom third. Once I get that lace glued down, I decide to add another piece of pattern paper. And so I have this little white floral that I cut out, and I'm just roughing up the edges, and I'm giving a little bit of ink around the top of it. And I decide to glue it right on top of the lace to separate, yet again we're making another separation, the floral from the lace from that bottom magazine half. But I really want it to kind of ripped and roughed up, and so I'm just taking my finger and I'm kind of tearing the top of it, and once I get it glued down, I'm going to trim the sides. Now that I have those edges trimmed, I'm just going to take some ink and I'm going to go around the edges and kind of distress it a little bit. And I'm going to curl down the tops of those straight edged florals that I added. And I just really want to give it kind of an antiqued old world feel. The magazine and the linens are old to begin with, but the prints that I added, those floral prints, aren't. And so I just want to make them match the look of it all together. So now this is the final part of this section for the cover, and I'm adding some very old small lace to the top portion, and this is going to be the final divide. So I'm looking at this horizontally, and yet again this is giving sort of a top base to that floral. It's reinforcing the blue line by adding the lace over it, but it's just giving a textural divide instead of just that flat blue line. So once I get that glued down, I'm going to leave the edges hanging because I'm not exactly sure how I want to flip them over, if I want to cut them, so it's all going to kind of depend on what I do on the back side. I'm just making sure everything looks straight, and now I am going to move on to the inside cover. So I decided to cover the inside with this old script letter, and I know that I want the focal point to be that upper left hand image and then that beautiful large script in the upper right hand corner. So I'm just adding my glue, and what I'm going to do is hold the paper up to the light so I can see the edges of my inside cover, and I can see exactly what is going to be framed on the inside cover. And so by doing this, I get a really good, it's not even a guess, it's an actual answer as to where my script is going to lay. And I even fold over the sides so I can see what that looks like. And once I'm satisfied with that, I go ahead and trim the edges. I'm going to move on to the inside back cover before I finish the inside front cover, because I'm going to do the exact same thing that I just did. I know that I want to use one of these invoices, and so I just put it up there to see which one I like better, and I'm just trying to determine which color I want, if I want the pink or if I want this cream one. I decide to use the cream one because I know that I'm going to cover the back portion of it with an avocado dyed paper doily. That's another thing that's inside of this journal. Both of these journals are a lot of hand dyed papers, avocado dyed, coffee dyed, that sort of thing. And because I know that I'm going to use that avocado dyed paper doily, I didn't think the pinks would match very well, and so I want to kind of stick with a creamy neutral. So I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm holding it up to the light, I'm framing it, and I'm trimming my edges. With my cover, I added some ink around the edges, I curled some of the edges, and I just made sure that each section was glued down properly. And by rubbing that down, I'm getting glue on my finger, so I'm rubbing that off of them, but I really want to make sure that I have a nice connection between the paper and the cardstock. So now I'm going to work on the back side, and I'm going to start by covering the majority of it with another piece of this very old magazine paper. So I glue it down, I ink up the edges, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to cover it with this avocado dyed paper doily, and I realized that I didn't add enough of that magazine, and I knew that I wanted, instead of that picture, I wanted a little bit of text, so I just add a little portion of that, and I'm trying out my paper doily to make sure when you see through those little holes that you can't see any of that white cardstock. I'm pulling it up, and then I'm going to glue it down just a little bit. I do want some of those edges curled up and sticking over, and then I'm going to wrap over the left side and the right side, and then I'm going to trim the bottom. I'm going to add some of this beautiful vintage lace to the bottom of the inside back cover, and I want it to wrap around to the back side too. I don't like these little pink areas in the middle because I feel like it's a little too bubblegum pink for my liking, so I just cut them out, and I want it frayed anyhow, and I kind of want it ripped, so it doesn't matter that I'm doing that. It's being a little bit more difficult than I thought, but it managed to come out perfectly, and it was exactly how I wanted it to be. So now that I'm trying to just line up, because I know that I want to flip it to the other side too, I'm trying to see what other pink portions I want to get out. So I put some glue down and I lay it kind of on an angle. You can see that's sort of a theme throughout both of these journals as well as my own journal. I kind of like to put the lace on an angle. I feel like it is a really nice textural element doing that. And you can see I just give it a tiny little bit of a snip, and then I try and rip it because that gives me those nice frayed edges. Seam ripper out to make sure there weren't any stray pink threads. I'm ripping some excess off the side. I also went around the doily and the edges, and I kind of curled the edges up to give it again that old antiqued look. Even though a lot of the stuff is antiqued, I want it antiqued a little bit more, and I'm just gluing down the edge of my lace. So now I'm going to move on to the inside cover, and I decided that I'm going to add a little pocket at the bottom using some paper. So I'm going to curl the tops, I'm going to add a little bit of ink, and I'm going to glue it down. And then I decide to add another piece of paper with a completely different pattern. So it's like a pattern on pattern, a floral pattern on pattern. And then I also add another piece of trim. So I'm adding 3 layers to this inside pocket. Once I trim the edge, I decide to add some old tatting, very antique tatting, to the top of this base bottom layer, and I'm doing it again to create a visual divide between the two patterns. Tatting is so beautiful, and it is a lost art. I do not see too many people doing tatting anymore, and it is such a beautiful, beautiful element to any journal page. So now I'm going to flip through these 2 journals. These are open spine journals, and so they are not connected to the spine, so you can pull the papers out and put them in as you see fit. It is tied together with some sari silk, and then the 2 covers are connected very delicately with some antique trim medallions, and so they have just 2 tiny pieces of thread that are connecting them, so you kind of have to be careful when you're opening and closing it. So I'm just going to flip through the rest of these 2 journals. As always, thanks so much for watching my YouTube channel and supporting my little Etsy store. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial on how to create a beautiful romantic layered journal cover. See you next time.